Well, a messy start to the morning on your Tuesday, but things looking nice out there right now with some sunshine, some blue skies, and a bit of sunshine peeking through, so that's all good. Greasy conditions this morning, some accidents, and as you would expect, it's late January, folks. We should be used to this type of thing. All right, I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always, and what is it they say? A dog's life, a year for a dog's life is 7. I can't remember what the ratio is. It's 7 years, I think, per dog life per year for a dog equals a year in human life. I think that's the ratio. That's what I used to hear. Why am I talking about this? Well, it's kind of like 2 weeks of Donald Trump equals how many years in normal life. It feels like it's been about 7 years already of Donald Trump. But just 2 weeks in, and here we are. We've already had a brush of a trade war with Mexico, and of course here in Canada. We were on the cusp of it yesterday at the 11th hour. We've got a 30-day reprieve, and people are asking the question, "What's next?" when it comes to Donald Trump, and I think that's a legitimate question. What is next? Where are we going next here? What are his motivations? What is really going on with Donald Trump, and what is motivating him? Is it an expansionism? Is it just a lark? Sometimes I tend to think what just comes into his mind, the first thing that comes into his mind is what comes out of his mouth. I don't think there's a whole lot of time or thought goes into much of what he says. Is he flexing his muscle, economic muscle? Is this a message to the rest of the world? What about trust? Has trust been broken here when it comes to the United States and our relationship as a country, Canada? Has trust been broken? And what should we expect next? Is this a wake-up call? I mean, these are a lot of questions, but they're questions we should be asking ourselves. Because 30 days is going to go by quickly, and here we'll be right back at it again. Everybody on tenterhooks wondering what's going on, how are we going to respond, what are markets going to do, all of these things. I think the message was pretty loud and clear, though, yesterday that it was just not a good idea, this trade war with Canada and Mexico, for that matter. Just not any real good justification that he could put forward for this. I mean, when asked about it, he waffles, he changes his tune. He talks about fentanyl. He talks about immigration. He talks about us just treating the United States badly. I mean, it seems to me just to be the ramblings of somebody who's unhinged. That's the only takeaway that I can take from Donald Trump. And I know some of you out there support the guy and like the guy and think that he's great and think that what he's doing has been long overdue. But when you look at the depth of what he's doing and the speed in which he's doing it, it's just unbelievable. Federal employee buyouts, downsizing the government payroll in the United States, inspectors general purge, prosecutors, firing prosecutors, shutting down investigations, FEMA under review. I mean, this is all just in 2 weeks, plus 3 trade wars. What's next? And I thought he was going to stop the Ukraine-Russia war in day one. I thought that was going to be over in the first day. Remember he said that? Said the first day, I will end that war. Well, that's not ended yet, is it? So these are all some things that I'm going to ask you to talk about and weigh in on when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12. What is truly going on here with Trump? Is this guy, and I know that it's a leading question, and again, I'll open it to all opinions. Some of you like Trump, think he's great, but think that he's great, but is he unhinged? And what are his motivations? What is going on here? That, I think, is something that we need to address. Also, will you pay more to buy Canadian? Or will you still buy whatever's the cheapest? And I understand that people's monthly, weekly budgets dictate a lot of this. Some people don't have a choice. A lot of people don't have a choice when it comes to what they buy and how much they pay for it. Some do, though. Will you, when possible, buy Canadian to be patriotic and support our country? And will you think twice about buying American now at this point? Including Teslas, of course. I saw a story where some Tesla owners are returning their vehicles early on lease and thinking twice about buying another Tesla. Not because they don't like them, just simply because of Elon Musk and the connection with the United States. And, of course, Canadian politics. We'll talk later with Lori Turnbull, Dalhousie University political scientist, about all of this. And Trudeau and his performance, again, how do you think that the Liberal government has responded to this? Some people would blame, and do blame, the Liberal government for all of this. They say that that's where the blame lies, is with the Liberals and not doing what they were supposed to do when it comes to military spending and defense spending in general and the border and all that. So we'll talk about we'll talk the political angles with Lori Turnbull as well, and whatever else you've got in your mind. Again, we'll open the phone lines between 11 and 12. And Rob Thacker will be by for the Science Files, of course, it being a Tuesday. So thanks so much for tuning in and listening, everybody. We appreciate it, as always. Now joining me for a chat is Osborne Burke, president of the Nova Scotia Seafood Alliance. Osborne, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Good morning.
All right, so I guess we can exhale at this point for 30 days, a 30-day exhale. What do you think?
Well, it's a 30-day delay. We hope cooler heads will prevail. I believe the federal government is making efforts, as are our provincial premiers, to raise awareness in the US of A and to let them realize how much potential impact negatively it will have on the U.S. industry. Those are the ones that will pay most of the tariffs. Those are the individuals that are going to pass it on to the average consumer in the U.S. of A who really can't afford it.
Okay, so how much were you bracing for? How much do you think this would impact your members and our exports, seafood exports?
Well, it will have a significant impact, no doubt, when 60% or more of our product, seafood, travels across the border into the U.S. However, the impact on states like Maine and others is far more severe than what you would see in Canada. And our friends in the U.S., and they are our friends, our customers that we deal with, that are loyal customers, they're feeling the pain of this craziness as well, and they're very confused and don't know how they're going to handle a 25% increase in costs. So they're just as frustrated as we are.
Okay, so you say their increase of 25% cost would be because that they would have to pass that on to their customers. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Bottom line is, if I sell a load of lobster or a load of processed product to a U.S. customer, when it crosses the border on the paperwork, the importer of record would be the U.S. customer.
Yeah.
Therefore, that's who has to pay the tariff, contrary to what the Mar-a-Lago bully has been saying, that Canada will pay, Mexico will pay, China will pay. Not very accurate. Not very accurate at all. And when you look at it in the first place, and I heard your reference earlier about the federal government and people blaming them, the bottom line with this is not about fentanyl, where less than 0.002% came in across the northern border. This is not about illegal migrants across the northern border. What this is about is a power trip by one individual. That's basically to sum it up.
Okay, so that 25% that, as you mentioned, that would be passed on to American consumers. Do you think that they would be willing to pay that extra expense, or because the thought would be that the importer would then reduce orders from Canadian exporters because there would be less demand? That's the theory here, is it not?
That would be a possibility, certainly. However, they also need our products, and no different than our oil from the West. Although the Mar-a-Lago bully stated quite clearly that we don't need Canadian oil. The reality check is they do. In the end of it, we're starting to look much greater at diversification, and that's going to take a little bit of time. But I think in some respects, the Mar-a-Lago bully's decision will, in some ways, benefit Canada in the longer term, because we've taken for granted this this cross-border trade for many years. And now the reality is we can't trust that anymore. We can't trust the U.S. to stand by treaties, by free trade agreements. They, in this business, trust and your word is something that's critical in the seafood business, as I'm sure in all businesses. And this is going to refocus a lot of Canadian businesses looking elsewhere and increasing their efforts. No different than we have a trade mission currently in Europe. There's one coming up in Taiwan. There's a number of them around that they're going to see a lot of increased effort by Canadian business looking at other markets. And in the long term, the loser of that is the US of A.
Okay, why have we not been doing that anyway? Would it not have been prudent to be looking for other markets?
Well, we have been to some degree, some more than others. However, you become a little bit complacent because you've got long-term relationships with USA customers, and they're basically, you pick up the phone and make a call, and you're selling a load of lobster or a load of crab or whatever. It's been a long history of cross-border trade and a lot of relationships built there. And, no different than the state of Maine that depends on our lobsters as we depend sometimes on some of their lobsters. It's cross-border back and forth, and it's very comfortable with those relationships, and we have been until several weeks ago.
Okay, so are there other you mentioned other markets, Europe and other Asian and wherever other markets might be. Are there any that would be a particular more ready at this time? Like, what do you think when you look at the global markets and the landscape? What looks more positive than others? Any really standing out that would be potentially really solid for Canada?
Very quickly, Europe has a lot of potential. You got 500 million people. There's a lot of potential. Canada has a long-standing relationship with EU countries. We also have Southeast Asia with a growing population, and they consume a lot of seafood. And in both those circumstances, when I look at, for us last year, South Korea, 3 to 4 loads of processed lobster that we hadn't done in other years. We build upon that. One thing about with your Asian customers, once you make a relationship and you build on that, and they're very loyal customers. So we need to do more of that. We need to refocus as much of our efforts as we can and reduce our dependency instead of having all our eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Okay, what type of time frame does it take to turn something like this around? I would think it's not going to be months; it would be years, would it not be?
Yes, I would say you're looking at a 3 to 5 years time frame. However, it'll depend on the relationships, the connections we make, and these trade missions. Our seafood is known worldwide as top quality, and there's a lot of companies or countries out there that would love to have the product. So in some cases, last year we turned down orders to Asia to supply our friends in the USA. This year, we'll try and support our friends as much as we can and hope this craziness goes away. But if not, we will, refocus our efforts. So in some cases, it'll happen quickly. In some cases, you're talking over a period of years. But in the long term, I think the Mar-a-Lago bully has done Canada a favor to make us realize just don't depend on the one market all the time.
What's your counterparts in the seafood industry south of the border? What are they saying on a personal level? Are they apologetic? Are they as dismayed as we are here? Are they confused, or what's the sentiment that you're hearing?
Speaking to some of our customers, long-term customers in Boston and Maine, they're in shock. They can't believe that this is happening, that they can't understand how their elected representatives can put them in such dire straits, potentially putting some of them out of business, because they can't afford a 25% tariff, as you've kind of alluded to. Some will pay it, some won't be able to pay it. So there's a real level of frustration, and they're on side with Canada saying we need to get this put to bed once and for all and resolved, because neither side can afford it, and especially not the US of A.
Well, Osborne, I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this, and we'll catch up again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Osborne Burke, president of the Nova Scotia Seafood Alliance. We'll talk to Patrick Sullivan when we come back. All right, joining us is Patrick Sullivan, President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Patrick, thanks for joining the show as always.
Well, thank you, Todd. Good to talk to you.
All right, so I guess we can exhale for at least 30 days, right? That's where we're at this point?
I think that's probably a good way to put it, but only for 30 days.
Yeah. How much of a scare was this for the business community yesterday?
Well, I mean, I think the scare has been going on all weekend. So yesterday was actually a bit of a sigh of relief by the end of the day. But no, it's very frightening for exporters, anyone who deals with the United States on a regular basis, to see the chance of a 25% tariff and the impact on your customers in the United States. But even more worrying, what was going to be $150 billion in countervailing duties, which means that products coming into Canada could have been tariffed as well, which would mean that some of the inputs for many of our customers, foodstuffs, manufacturing materials, steel for buildings, many of these things could be impacted by the tune of 25% as well.
Yeah, and the logistics of it, and not knowing. I talked to Dan Kelly yesterday of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and he said that a lot of his members were unaware as to even logistically how to make this all happen.
Well, yeah, that's probably true. We're about to send out an email to our members. It's going to give them some advice on dealing with the U.S. border. So we need to get ahead of some of these things in the next 30 days and be a little more prepared as we face down the end of February and the beginning of March.
All right, so there's a lot of talk about supporting local and buying Canadian and all that stuff, and I know that that's certainly something that any chamber would love to hear and does love to hear. But do you think that Canadians and Haligonians and Nova Scotians will heed this and take that advice and do that?
Well, I think they will. I mean, clearly there was a lot of talk on the weekend about people changing behaviors. I got rid of my Smuckers or my Jif peanut butter made by Smuckers, which is made in Ohio, the home of J.D. Vance, and decided that I would start to eat more Kraft peanut butter, which is produced in Montreal. The reality is all the peanuts come from the United States, so it doesn't really matter. But I think people are going to make decisions. I like California wine, but I can live without California wine. There's a lot of good wine in Nova Scotia and in other locations. So, I think people are going to change their behavior a little bit after this recent scare.
All right, diversifying markets. I chatted with Osborne Burke before our conversation, president of the Nova Scotia Seafood Alliance. And he said that there's a lot of work and a lot of work to do when it comes to diversifying markets. And perhaps we've had a laissez-faire attitude towards this, assuming and trusting that our relationship with the United States would always be what it is today or has been. What are your thoughts on diversifying of markets and the sense of urgency that we now need or we now have?
Well, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, we should be diversifying markets. You should always not have a significant reliance on one customer. But the reality is that's going to take time. That's going to take time to seek out other markets in Europe. It's going to take time for us to take greater advantage of the markets inside Canada. And seafood's not so much an issue because they don't produce seafood in Ontario, but there's a lot of interprovincial trade barriers that people need to think about that could actually, studies we've seen show could relieve a tariff barrier, if you will, an imaginary tariff barrier of almost 21%. So we could see real improvements in trade across Canada if we could trade like the U.S. does across U.S. states where there's no significant barriers across all those states.
All right, there's talk about, look, everybody has ideas, and emotions were high yesterday, and I think for good reason. People feel betrayed. But there was some who suggest that perhaps we should turn away cruise ships, American cruise ships, and and kind of, but we I think when it comes to tourism, we rely on the American traveler big time. So I don't know that is something. I guess what I'm getting at is that I think we need to delineate between Donald Trump and the White House and politics and Americans in general, and in particular people who want to visit our region, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love the United States. I love Americans. I love the dollars they spend and the money they bring to our area, and we, those are export dollars. So we need to continue to take advantage of those. It is primarily the president of the United States that has created this upset. He's relying on some advice. I mean, it took me a while to figure out why he's doing this. There is a fellow named Stephen Marin, who is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and he believes in tariffs. And he has, whether he's the one convincing the president or the president was already convinced, but there is a bit of method to this madness. And let's face it, he said he was going to implement tariffs, and he got change along the Canadian border, and he got change along the Mexican border. So he did get what he asked for. And will he do it again? Absolutely. It would be upsetting if he does it over and over and over again. But, if you read what the new chair of his Council of Economic Advisors, Stephen Marin, says, he would say that tariffs are a valid way to take advantage of your neighbors and other trading partners. So, we haven't seen the end of this. It's going to be a difficult road, and we're seeing a significant shift in the way countries trade, both north-south and around the world. And we're going to see that for the next 4 years at least, and probably longer.
Well, hence the need to diversify our markets, right? It's as simple as that.
Right.
We can't sustain this roller coaster ride for 4 years.
We can't. So we need to take advantage of the opportunities that Canada presents. We need to remove the tariff barriers that we have within provinces. That's the first thing. Productivity in Canada absolutely needs to improve. We have some of the lowest productivity in North America when you look at some of the Canadian provinces. And frankly, we got to change the tax system. The U.S. is about to lower taxes again. And if you're a manufacturer and you're thinking, well, where should I place my next manufacturing plant? You're going to go to the place with the most competitive tax rates and the most competitive regulatory environment. And that's going to be the United States in the coming months and years. So we need to start thinking nationally and provincially about how we're going to change those things as well.
How do we measure productivity?
Oh gosh, there's a question. I think it's GDP, and it's GDP per capita. If we look across the country and around the world, and ours is pretty miserable in Canada when you compare it to the United States. I mean, in Nova Scotia, sadly, we're south of Alabama when it comes to productivity. And that's something, I wouldn't have expected, but in the U.S., they invest in machinery, they invest in technological change. And frankly, we don't tend to do that, and we don't tend to reward that in Canada. And therefore, we're a bit of a laggard when it comes to productivity improvements. And that's something that needs to be thought about. We talk about AI. I mean, we're still thinking about, whether we should put in a new machine in a plant, and we should put in that new machine in a plant. Sadly, perhaps someone will lose their job, but then they can get a job at another plant because they're going to be more productive. There's going to be more money coming into Nova Scotia. So, we need to start thinking about these things across the country, and the federal government really needs to think about these things as well.
And just quickly, we're out of time, but on taxation, we do receive a lot of benefits from taxation, not to champion high tax jurisdiction, but healthcare and on it goes, right? There are advantages to what we do get back, and I know it's not proportionate, but we have to consider the services that we do enjoy here in Canada.
We do, and those services are magnificent. I mean, I forget what the number is, but there's a statistic: 1 out of every 2 or 3 or 4 bankruptcies in the U.S. is because of healthcare costs.
Right.
But so there's significant improvements by living in Canada. But the reality is, I gosh, I hate to sound terrible, but you can't have it all. And we need to have jobs as well, and we need to keep those jobs. And, if you're a manufacturing company right now, I hate to say it, you're not thinking about locating in Canada, right? You're thinking about locating in the United States and shipping to Canada. And we can't afford to lose those jobs. We need those jobs in Canada to continue to employ the people, to have them continue to pay taxes. So we've got a much larger population that we've had in the past. Shouldn't we have those people employed? If we have a growing population, which we probably will continue to have, we should be able to share that tax burden a little more equitably, and perhaps we'll be able to maintain the same standard of living, but we can lower some of that tax burden. And there needs to be efficient government spending as well. So we can't forget about that.
Patrick, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
All right. Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Take care. Patrick Sullivan, President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. In the next half hour, a few things, including politics with Lori Turnbull. We'll be back. All right, we're going to give away a pair of Mooseheads tickets for Friday's game. They're hosting Blainville Brolier. I don't know, probably did not pronounce that quite the way it should be, but that's okay. Y'all get the point. Free tickets. That's all you need to know how to respond to. If you'd like to see the Mooseheads host Blainville on Friday night at 7 o'clock, be caller 5 now at 902-405-6000. Again, caller 5. It's the tickets, 902-405-6000. And good luck. Again, 902-405-6000, caller 5. Now, a few emails. Jim says, Canada bowed down to King Donald Trump by appeasing him on a phony northern border drug threat in order to avoid the threat of tariffs. Most experts know that Canada is not a threat to the United States regarding fentanyl, and to invest more money, $200 million and 1,000 people on our northern border, along with the fentanyl czar, etc., simply giving into the wishes of the king. The bigger picture, the bigger picture idea is bogus because tariffs will still be on the table again in some form over the next 4 years. Because when a bully wins, you lose. Mark Carney said Canada would never give in to a bully, while we have. We were told by Trudeau to be united and stand together, while the government caved in much to my dismay. I am disappointed in Trudeau and Carney, but it certainly shows that we are at the mercy of the United States when it comes to our economy, and the premiers have shown they cannot come together, namely Alberta and Saskatchewan, even in a crisis like this. In closing, I, at this time, do not trust any federal politician of any stripe at a time when the Canadian people needed them the most. And that is Jim. Those are comments from Jim, who calls the show regularly, of course, Jim Hoskins. Well, look, the government is in a bad situation right here. It really is. It's in a can't-lose situation, can't-win situation, I should say. First of all, it's a government that is ready to fall, and the premier, or the prime minister rather, is on the way out. So he's a lame duck prime minister, Justin Trudeau. So that kind of neuters his ability to act forcefully on behalf of the country. The same goes for his entire cabinet. Quite frankly, they are just riding out the clock at this point. So how much authority do they really have? So there's that. There's a political vacuum right now. Some would suggest that Parliament should be recalled, regardless of the fact that the Liberals don't have a leader. And look, there's an argument to be made for that. We are still, for all intents and purposes, at war with the United States, a trade war, not a military war, but a trade war nonetheless, with huge implications and ramifications. And where are our parliamentarians? At home in their constituencies, in their ridings. Unbelievable. Because Parliament is prorogued because of what's happening with the Liberals. Now, the argument could be made, okay, let's say that Justin Trudeau or the Governor General or somebody in authority reconvenes Parliament. What would be the first thing that would happen? The opposition would table a bill to end the government session, That's what it would do. And we know that. So again, politics, when you're dealing with politics and politicians, it doesn't help. It adds to the complexity of all of this. Because it's always politicized. Of course it is. So I don't know really what the end game is, again, with Donald Trump. Where this all goes, I have no idea. Another email from Emma says, I know the tariff war is on pause, and that might sound small, but after hearing Jim's comments earlier today about moving away from American products, if you have the mayor on, I'm curious to know if they're going to continue paying that American company for the pallet shelters when they bypass Nova Scotia companies that could have built them. It would be a great way to give future pallet shelter builds to Nova Scotia company rather than have a company from California build them. That comes from Emma, and that's a great point. Because those pallet homes, that is a California company. And I still have not been able to figure out why we have to procure these pallet homes from, or again, that's the brand name, pallet homes. Why these shelters have to be made in California. Why can't we come up with our own procurement for this and build our own? That's a good question. John says Trump played us like a fiddle. What will he want us to do in the next 30 days, when the next 30 days is up? Maybe when Trudeau is gone, we'll get a reprieve. Expect nothing less from a bully. On buying things, it is natural to buy what costs less. And again, I think Donald Trump enjoys making us nervous, making the world nervous, keeping people on edge. That's part of his MO, right? That's part of what he does. He keeps everybody guessing. What's he going to do next? And I think that he creates kind of this sense of uncertainty that's part of the game, right? It's like an abusive relationship in a way, really, if you think about it. He'll treat you good, he'll treat you nice, he'll pat you on the head, tell you everything's great, and then the next day he's a different guy. And you just never know what to expect. That is the hallmark of an abusive relationship. And we here in Canada just think, well, maybe in 30 days things will change. And a lot can happen in a month. Absolutely. Maybe something else will distract him or take his attention away. Who knows? But what are we dealing with when it comes to Donald Trump? This is one of the main questions that I'm going to ask you today to weigh in on when we open the phone lines in about 20 minutes' time after the 11 o'clock news. What are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with somebody who is rational, who actually has a plan, who is actually methodical and systematic in what they're doing? Or are we dealing with somebody who's just basically unhinged? Because this has only been 2 weeks of this, folks, so far. 2 weeks of Donald Trump. And it's hard to believe that it's only been 2 weeks, but again, it's what is going on with him? And why is nobody in the United States, when I say nobody, I'd say virtually nobody, in the United States of any authority, including lawmakers, senators, governors, people of influence, Barack Obama, somebody speak up against this, what's going on. But the power of Donald Trump right now is immeasurable and immense. And what are his motivations? And is he truly a genius, as he likes to think that he is, and many think that he is? Or is he unhinged and delusional? Those are some questions that you can respond to, again, when we open the phone lines in a little bit. We'll talk politics with Lori Turnbull when we come back. All right, joining us is Lori Turnbull, Dalhousie University political science professor. Lori Turnbull, thanks for joining us, as always.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for having me.
All right, so a 30-day exhale, right?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I was wondering, why did Mexico end up getting some little cargo and we didn't? And so, yep, a couple of hours later, it came through. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the end of this? It looks like Trudeau coughed up some, what Trump is calling concessions, but ultimately it looks like not a whole lot, much more in addition to what we were doing already. I shouldn't say that, $200 million. But ultimately, this is much better than being stuck with tariffs today. So we'll see how the next 30 days play out.
All right. So what's going to change in the next 30 days, do you think?
I mean, it depends on why Trump is really doing this and what he wants to get out of it. Like, if he wants to look like he's extracting something, he's in charge, he wants that kind of power move thing to happen, well then, if he looks like he's getting something out of Canada and that he's able to go back to people and say, look, we're forcing Canada to fix the fentanyl prices, we're forcing them to fix what's wrong with their border, that might be enough for him to kind of look at this as a win for himself and look at this as something that he's making Canada do. On the other hand, I mean, if he's looking at tariffs as part of a broader expansionist package, part of a broader campaign to generate external revenue to pay for their own economy, well, this, the conversation about tariffs might not be over. I'm sure, the 30 days buys us a window to negotiate. It also buys us some time to do some of the things that we would have done anyway in response to the tariffs. So have some more conversations about bringing down interprovincial trade barriers, have some more conversations about diversifying our trade relationships. And that way, we're better off anyway, right, regardless of what happens with the tariffs.
What's your message to those who insist that this is all our fault, Canada's fault, and that we've been laggards on defense spending, which is true, we have been. When it comes to GDP, when it comes to those who say that we've been a laggard on the border, and they blame us, what's your response to that?
Okay, I mean, I think that independent of anything that's going on with Trump right now, it is absolutely fair to say that Canada, there are things that we could do, right? Like there are lots of people who think we should be spending more on defense. There's an argument to be made that that's the case. There's an argument to be made that there's more we could do at the border. Those things can be true at the same time as we can say that Trump's negotiation strategy is kind of abusive. And I don't think that this kind of back and forth with the kind of 11th hour changing the mind and this kind of attempt to take control over things, right? Like this seems to be his negotiation style. That aspect of things is not our fault. Why would it be? And even if Trump has ideas about what needs to happen at the border, like some of what he's saying is just kind of illogical, right? Like I'm trying not to sound like a total anti-Trump jerk here,
yeah.
But like, good Lord, whose responsibility is it to protect what's going into the United States? I think that's your responsibility, United States, your borders too.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sort of stuff he's saying with no basis of fact around them. And so I don't take kindly to an argument that, Canada's in this situation, it's all our fault. Even though, sure, there are other things we could be doing.
What are your thoughts on Justin Trudeau's response the evening of when this was all happening?
I thought it was a very effective political speech, actually. I'm not always a big fan of Justin Trudeau as a communicator, but I thought Saturday evening he was very focused. He was patriotic, which he typically, I shouldn't say that, I guess, but he hasn't always come across that way. He's come across, I think, in many ways as very critical of Canada. And so to hear him say, you know what, we're in this together with Canada has been a strong ally of the U.S., and he laments the breakdown of this relationship, which is what it looked like was happening at the time. I think he struck a chord with people. It's interesting to me that he's having, what I take to be quite a poignant political moment on his way out. Like he only has a few weeks left in the job, right? And so, I guess about 6 weeks. But interesting to see him connecting with people at a time where, obviously we are in a crisis situation. It seems like crisis averted for a period of time, but there's still not stability in the relationship with the U.S., which is the larger problem.
And perhaps that's the reason why he was effective and impactful in the way that he was, because he's more relaxed and not worried about re-election and the scrutinization that goes along with that. What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I wondered, honestly, whether this type of thing would happen, because when a politician decides they're not going to be in this anymore, they're not going to contest the next election, they're not doing anything for votes anymore. That can be refreshing. that can bring on a moment of clarity for them where they're going to do things in a way that makes sense to them, and they might have more purpose, more kind of focus in that moment, because all of that concern about survival in the next election and how to play something just kind of goes out the door, and then you're able to see things more strategically. I don't know. I'm not in his head, but I can see it. I can understand that.
Okay, what about Pierre Poilievre and his response to all of this? Because he's got to be very careful, because you don't want to be seen as being adding to the problem and being incendiary at a time in which being unified is important and necessary. So this must be a difficult dance for Poilievre as well, at a time when they're riding high in the polls and doing well, and I'm sure that they don't want to see any wind in the sails of the Liberals, but the Liberals have a leadership debate going on, and a potential bump from that. What are your thoughts on Poilievre and their response?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think this is a complicated moment for Poilievre, because for a long time, it just looked like the next election was a foregone conclusion. The Conservatives were going to trounce the Liberals. The Liberals might lose big time. You know, it might be disastrous for them. Poilievre was just kind of counting down the days till an election, and just watching his own numbers go up, right? Even though he kind of consistently had some negatives right there, right? Like, it seemed like his negatives were always about as high as his positives personally, but the Conservatives were far and away looking to, they were going to form a huge majority. And, you know, many polls are still saying that. But now I think the ballot question and the whole political conversation in Canada is shifting toward things like, you know, the relationship with the U.S. and what we're doing as a country and how we can show up differently in the world and what we want to invest in that, at the same time as people are still thinking about the affordability crisis, the housing crisis. And I think we're seeing how all those things are tied together, frankly. And so for Poilievre, some of the issues that he's always been resonating on, you know, like the affordability crisis, like the housing crisis, like, they're still there. But now you've got this added piece where Trudeau is no longer the ballot question. It's more like Trump is part of the ballot question. So harder for Poilievre, I think, to land some of his critiques, particularly on the carbon tax, because all of the people who are running for Liberal leaders say we're not doing that. At least the front runners are saying it. And I think for Poilievre, you're right. He doesn't want to be too critical of the Liberals right now, because that runs the risk, I think, strategically of actually undermining the Canada's efforts right now, but also politically running the risk of looking like you're not on side with Canada, right? Like, I think Poilievre has to play that very carefully. And so you can see him coming out with some ideas that many of them are very similar to what the Liberals are doing in the first place. He wants Parliament to reconvene, I think, which would give him the opportunity to be more vocal and get more eyes on him in this moment, you know, without undercutting the government. But they're not going to recall Parliament early. Why would they? The opposition parties are saying they defeat them. So it's a weird time. And I think Poilievre ultimately does not want to lose his proposition, right? Like, he's had this thing in hand for months. He doesn't want to lose that now.
Yeah, and then also a lot of his support, I would think, would align with Trump's support. I don't know that for sure, and I don't know empirically if that would vet out, but he has to be careful to not be too hard and harsh on the Republicans and Trump and their policies, when a lot of that probably resonates with much of his support.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that, and I'm very curious about what's going to happen for people who may, in Canada, who for the last number of months might have, you know, been people who would support both Poilievre and Trump. Has Trump changed their minds now that he's threatening tariffs? It looked like he was about to go through with it. Now there's a very unified patriotic response in Canada where people are talking about, like, not buying American products, taking bourbon off the shelves. Like, you know, it very quickly geared up into a very pro-Canada kind of response. And so I wonder if that has changed the minds of people who may previously have seen alignment between Trump and Poilievre. Like, is that off the table now?
And what about Jagmeet Singh? What are your thoughts on Singh's response to all of this, if it's even noteworthy?
Well, I think the content of the response is noteworthy in the sense that he's talking about higher grocery prices, which would be awful, on potential job losses. And I think those points are extremely important. And also, if there are tariffs, it's not going to affect everybody the same. Like I saw a number like, the average effect on a household in Canada would be something like $2,000 a year. Well, that's not really, like, that average is kind of artificial, right? Like, if someone has a lot of disposable income, paying more for a Canadian product, like that, a couple of dollars here and there, that's not going to make any, makes a difference, but it's not going to make a huge difference. You can manage that. But someone who doesn't have disposable income, that's going to be really hard. Like, it's going to be a massive problem in terms of expanding this wealth gap that we already have. And so I think the NDP need to be talking about that. I'm just not sure if anybody's listening to Jagmeet Singh right now for all kinds of political reasons. I don't know if he's going to be punching through on this or not.
Okay, Lori, always great. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Todd. Take it easy.
All right, take care. Lori Turnbull, Dalhousie University political science professor. Now, what is on your mind? What would you like to get into? 902-405-6000. Just 2 weeks in, and it seems like it's been forever since Donald Trump has taken over the Oval Office in the White House. Just 2 weeks in. Is the guy unhinged or some type of genius? Because some people out there think that he's got this all together and it's all big part of a plan that we don't understand and we can't comprehend. It's too complicated. He's just too much of a genius for us all to figure out. Or is this just somebody who is unhinged? 902-405-6000, that or whatever else you'd like to get into. Your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, taking your calls. So to reach us, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? It's, again, 902-405-6000. You could talk about whatever you'd like. It's an open hour, but something that I'm throwing out there is, of course, who else? That's right, Donald Trump. Wouldn't be a day without talking about Donald Trump. And the question is simple. Is he unhinged or some type of genius? Because it's one of the two, really, if you think about it. And what draws people to Donald Trump, I think in many ways, is that unpredictability, that volatility, that look, he's not a normal, prototypical politician, never has been. But I don't know if that's worth the rest that goes with it. Because, yes, politicians, typical buttoned-up politicians, are boring in many ways, and have their own scandals, and have their own challenges that come with it. They're not transparent. You can't trust them. On and on it goes. We all know it. We've been through the gamut with politicians, and people in the United States have had their fill of that type of politician. Hence the movement, the Donald Trump movement. But look, folks, what type of collateral damage comes with this, and how much can we absorb, and how much can the United States absorb? I mean, at some point, you have to be embarrassed for yourself, do you not? If you're an American, I mean, here's a guy that, in my opinion, is demonstrating the qualities of somebody who is not with it. This is somebody who is, to use that term, unhinged. Because there's no rhyme or reason for what he's doing or what he's saying. It makes no sense. Does it make any sense that the president of the United States would at the end of a comment about a trade war with Canada regularly just throw it out there? They could become the 51st state. I mean, that is a ludicrous, ridiculous comment. It makes no sense. It's not something that you would expect anybody to say, let alone the president of the United States. Maybe you think he is a genius. Maybe you think that there's a rhyme or reason to what he's doing. Give us a call. I'll do my best to hear you out. But I'm of the belief that he demonstrates the qualities of somebody who is unhinged, again, to use that term. What are your thoughts? And what has changed? What will change in 30 days? What's going to change? What's going to be any different in 30 days? Are we going to spend another $1 billion at the border? I don't know. I just don't get it. 902-405-6000. What is your response to this or whatever else you'd like to get into? Again, 902-405-6000. Tim, hello.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
Well, you?
Good. Listen, unhinged, cheese is off the cracker, call him whatever you want, but, he's certainly unstable. But here's a couple things that concerns me. We keep spending, he now has us spending $1 billion more than we were this time yesterday. That being said, we do have a free trade agreement that I think expires in another year. I'm not sure why we're not utilizing if there's strengths in there to say we've negotiated a deal's a deal, and then utilizing whatever we can to make sure if there's penalties to be associated, we file whatever we need to do to make sure that we uphold that. But, at the end of the day, I don't think he's a genius. I think we have to recognize the position versus Donald Trump. And the two certainly are separate. At the end of the day, what concerns me also is, 30 days from now, we're early in March, the Prime Minister steps down shortly thereafter. Where are we going to be then? And, what does that look like? But at some point, the circus has to come to an end. And we either say, that's it, we're done, and tariffs are tariffs, and nobody wants to pick a fight, but sometimes you have to have the fight. And if that's what he wants, I understand. They're 10 times our size. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we just can't keep going on 30-day extensions. It's bad for the stock market. It's bad for investments. And I'm not sure where or if or how this ends.
Okay, Tim, appreciate your comments. Thanks. Take care. 902-405-6000. Is it Primrose? Is that your name?
That's my name, Todd.
Okay.
Yeah,
what
go ahead.
No, what's in your mind?
Yeah, what's on my mind is I'm a longtime resident of District 4, East Preston. And I'm not living there now, but I still own land in the area of expensive land. And what's happening is the surveyors, and WSP and North Star, they have gone in there and they're doing what they want rather than what I want. They took my money, over $5,000, but they didn't give me what I wanted. Now, it seems as though that, Preston used to be quite big. Preston is very small now. Now, I'm part owner of 16 acres there. Actually, I think my family they are definitely involved. And I don't know if they've made a deal with the government to put a road through this land. I don't know. But HRM has accepted an application from them. And it seems as though my name was forged on a particular document. And a government official through the Lands Initiatives program invited me into that program to
Okay, Primrose, I'm really not following what you're getting at here. To be honest with you, I don't mean to be short with you, but I'm not following with what you're getting at. Do you want to send me an email and perhaps I can look at your grievance and we can have a chat about this? Or
well, the bottom line is we've got surveyors coming into the community and doing into the black community and doing what they want to do, and the residents of the community have come to me and said that, but they're afraid to say anything. And there's being, there's I mean, witchcraft is being done. I mean, this may sound a little bit ludicrous, but it is facts. Now,
listen. I'm going to put you on hold, and Vanessa can get your number, and if you'd like, I can give you a call and we can talk about it off air because I'm just not following you right now. Okay. All right. Thank you. 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
Hi, Todd.
Hi there.
Great discussion this morning, as always.
Thank you.
One of the things, everybody's saying, what's Trump doing? What's this happening? And I look at it like, they criticize Trudeau for not making a plan, and they criticize Trudeau for having a plan and all these types of things. It's not possible to plan with the man. I look at it like if you had a ping pong table with a flat surface and you drop the ball on the surface, you might figure out where it's going to roll. With Trump, that surface is a cone, and he drops the ping pong ball every day, and one day you're on one side of the table, the next day you're on the next side of the table, and it's not possible to predict what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. Is he unhinged? He's insane. That man is insane. And, I've been very, very angry since he talked about plundering Canada, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to plunder Canada. If he was to come to this deal, I think Canadians would be outraged. I think and it was the first time I ever wrote a letter to my MP. I wrote a letter and I requested that the Prime Minister's office have the American ambassador come to meet him in the PMO's office and say, what is this? What are these threats that are happening here? And kick the guy out of Canada and convince every nation in the world to support Canada about the presumed plundering of Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. I mean, this is totally reminiscent of what Hirohito did in expanding Japan. And he did it to get war materials. Now, you ask me what's the big picture? Who knows? But Trump indicated that he wants Saudi Arabia to invest $1 trillion in the United States. He said $1 trillion. He's not interested in Canadian oil. He's interested in Saudi oil. He's interested in getting Canada oil out of his market. He wants Saudi oil. He wants Russian oil. He wants American oil. And he wants to go on a war footing with China. And we'd better wake up. We'd better wake up because that's this plunder. Why is he plundering Canada? Well, he needs our resources to make war. He needs Greenland's resources to make war. And he's just crazy enough to do it. I mean, Hirohito, same thing, right? You take Malaysia, you take the rubber, you invade China. It's the same playbook. And our politicians and our Canadian people have to wake up and get on board. I mean, is it a conspiracy theory? The Romans would say, quo bono, who benefits? They would figure everything out by who benefits. Trump benefits from Saudi oil because he can put the money in his back pocket. He can't do that corruptly with Canadian oil. He benefits from Russian oil in the same extent, and Russia benefits from him. So, you're asking what's going on? This is serious stuff, and I am so angry with those MAGA people. And I just came back from Florida. I sat in the plane next to a banker, and he asked me what I thought. I said, look, I'm a guest in your country. I am not going to sit here. I said, I respect the office of the President of the United States, but I said, I invite you to come to Canada so we can speak freely.
Okay, Jim.
Anyways.
Appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz. What is on your mind today? Donald Trump, is he unhinged or is he a genius or something in between? What is going on with this guy? And it's just been 2 weeks with a long 4 years to go. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. 30-day reprieve, time to exhale. What's going to change in 30 days? Well, I don't know. We'll be right back where we were yesterday. Uncertainty, not knowing, fear, trepidation. Is this really something that you would expect from the United States, from the President of the United States? As the trust has obviously been broken. So what are we dealing with when it comes to Trump? Are we dealing with somebody who's rational? Are we dealing with somebody who is methodical and strategic? Or are we dealing with somebody who is unhinged? 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Buddy, hello.
Yeah, hello. How you doing?
I'm well, you?
I'm just wonderful. Any better than to me, like I told you before. Okay, with regards to Trump, okay, I want to tell you, Trump is a Gemini. I don't know if you're into the stars. I'm not really into them. But I am a Gemini myself, okay? Now, with regards to it all, Geminis are born leaders. JFK was the most loved president the U.S. ever had, and he was a Gemini. Marilyn Monroe also was a Gemini. very influential people. Paul McCartney is also a Gemini. Okay? Very, very influential people. They manipulate or whatever. I don't know what it is, but they are the strongest star in the universe, Gemini. You can check that out if you like.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah. No, that's not it.
Okay.
Anyway, he has intentions maybe to rule the world. I don't know, but he's on his way. He don't care about anything in regards to other than himself, as far as I'm concerned, and he's out there to do for himself, to make a name for himself, and he's definitely doing that. Us as Canadians are going to feel the pinch. Anyway, my friend, that's pretty much all I've got to say.
Okay, thanks
you.
for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Kevin, hello.
Hello. How you doing, buddy?
I'm well. You?
Hanging in there with all this Trump talk, eh?
Yeah, hanging in there.
Well, listen, I got a different view. I don't love Trump. I never was a political person, but in the last 3-4 years, things have sort of switched up, and I like to follow it. And I'm hearing a lot of patriotic Canadians not worrying about their border, and I think it's kind of foolish to think about having a piece of property without securing the borders. I don't think you would have a piece of property like
okay,
that.
so securing the borders, what do you mean securing the borders? How do you know that the borders aren't secured?
I think Trump, he sees the big picture of the way the world's changing, and I think China has infiltrated the Canadian government big time, and it's been proven over and over again by 100 different talking heads. So I don't know. I just think we got to look at the big picture, that Trump is he's sort of looking at the United States, and then he looks at Mexico, he looks at Canada, and he sees the threat from Russia, from China, and that he needs to make his border, call it North America, his sort of focal point. So I don't know. I might be, whether you want, like, as far as our resources, we got tons of resources that we should be utilizing.
Yes.
Like, if you had a backyard full of chickens, would you buy eggs? So I don't know. That's just the way I think, Todd.
Okay. Appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. See where we're going next. Keith, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How are you doing?
I'm well. You?
Good. Well, I think Trump is a genius.
Okay. Tell me why.
A genius at being a bullshitting con artist. That's what he's a genius at. Now, he has gotten into the most powerful seat on the planet by being a bullshitter. He did it once, then he turned around and did it twice, and people got him back in office. He's surrounded himself by people. He's handpicked these people because they're compliant, sycophants, and I would hazard a guess that none of them will be there in 4 years. He may not even be around in 4 years, but I think he enjoys. Oh, but I'd like to make one other point. That person that mentioned about the pallet shelters, I think that's a good idea.
What? That we should make our own?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why pay the Americans in California to make pallet shelters?
Yeah.
But now back to what I was saying. I think he enjoys manipulating people. He's sort of dangling this noose over our heads with these tariffs. 30 days from now, and who, like another caller said, he's unpredictable. Everybody knows that. So, what's he going to do in 30 days? Is he going to sit back and muse maybe I could put those tariffs back on and see what happens.
Yeah.
That is the type of person that he is. He doesn't care about anything or anyone but himself. And if he wanted to have Canada for the 51st state, he's serious. He's not joking around. And he could take, if he were to make that happen, or if we were to let it happen, I should say, then he could have all of North America, and then he would be able to take what we have here, all our natural resources, our minerals, our uranium, our lithium, our oil, and then take that and sell it off to the highest bidder and make a profit. So what do you think? I think that's his intentions.
Well,
and, they're not good intentions, and I think we're stuck with this clown for 4 years, and there's only two ways. There's only two ways that he will not be here, and one is natural causes, and the other one is unnatural causes.
Well, okay, all right. Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Look, it's pretty evident that Trump it covets a lot of what this country has, and why wouldn't he? Right? We've been endowed with amazing natural resources: uranium and lithium and oil and gas and water, and I could go on and on and on. Aluminum, sure. And is it a concern that we have a shared border? Yeah, that's always going to be a concern. Could we do more? Yeah, of course we could do more. But the reality is this, is that when you're dealing with somebody who is not rational, not logical, is unpredictable, doesn't matter what you do. Again, I liken it again to the abusive relationship. The abuser often tries to do everything they can do to appease and to change the behavior of the person who's doing the abusing. That's a characteristic of an abusive relationship, and it never works. And I would say that this would be the same thing. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Here's a quick email from Phil, then back to the phones. Phil says, firstly, I do not like Donald Trump at all. That being said, he is making things happen, good and bad. Mexico sending 10,000 troops to the border. Canada spending $1 billion to strengthen our border. Criminal immigrants being caught and sent back to their country. None of those are bad things. They are things that are good for everyone involved. He has no diplomatic skills whatsoever, but you have to listen to him or else. And by the way, I'm getting all kinds of emails from people who are opposed Donald Trump, and I'm trying to get through them as quickly as I can, and I want to be as balanced as I can about all of this. But again, this is just a reflection of what people are sending me and what people are saying. 902-405-6000. So what are your thoughts on Donald Trump? Is he unhinged? Is he a genius? What is he? 902-405-6000. Roy, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Well, you?
Good. I shut my radio off. You know what? First time caller, Todd. I listen to your show a lot. My comments on Trump, kind of what I know is if I was running a business, he would be the guy I want to run my business, not my country. The guy is unhinged, unpredictable.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. You know what? National COVID. He calls it a Chinese disease virus.
Yeah.
Come on. Right? Like, I mean, we all see it. We all know. USA is on a downfall. Their economy is on a downfall. And Trump is looking at ways to get it back to being a number one nation, and they're not anymore. They're on a downfall.
Why do you say they're on a downfall?
Well, you look at their numbers. And as far as how much money they owe to the world, and you know, it's one of the strongest G7 countries. But I mean, when you look at BRICS, I mean, the Republic of China, that's where the money is, right? That's where tech is. That's where everybody's going. Everybody's spending their money. They're the number one. Unfortunately, it is what it is. He's looking at ways to make Canada, U.S. a big, beautiful, strong nation. Ain't going to happen. Canadians are proud. It's just things he's throwing out there. It's like he's throwing out a hook and looking for bait, and this 30-day pause on it's just a way for the Canadian government to come up with more ways of whether we can strengthen our borders or not hurt their economy. But he's just throwing things out there. As far as I'm sick of hearing about him. I don't even listen to the news half the time now because for the last 2 weeks there's been Trump everywhere.
Yeah.
Kind of tired of it. I watched an Arnold Schwarzenegger video yesterday morning, and he talked about Trump, and yeah, he hit it right on the nail. Exactly who he is. But if I was running a business, come on, Todd. I mean, he's a salesman. He's a bullshitter. He's a salesman. If I was running a business, I'd want him running my business.
Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. Say what you wanted with the U.S. economy and what direction it's heading in. It's still the largest economy in the world, folks. In 2024, the United States had the largest economy in the world with a gross domestic product of just under $29 trillion. China had the second largest economy at $18.5 trillion U.S. So you can say what you want. It has amazing clout, and it will unleash a lot more power by removing its restrictions on oil and gas. And look, that's going to, Trump uses that term, unleash the power of the United States. That's a game changer. Because investing in green technology, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's important or not, is extremely expensive. In contrast to drilling oil in conventional carbon-based fuels. And the United States is endowed with lots of oil and gas. More than anywhere in the world. Now, it's going to take a number of years to develop it, and you don't just turn the tap on overnight, as he would like to make it seem as though it's that simple. But the U.S. economy, folks, don't kid yourselves, is the economy. It's the largest economy in the world. So you can say it's on the downward trend, and perhaps it is. I don't know what the numbers would vet out. What economists would say, and sure, they've got their weaknesses and they've got their shortfalls, like any economy does. But pretty well positioned at this point. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Let's see, where are we going next? Let's talk to David. Hello, David.
Hi, Todd. Yeah, I'm just responding to this whole tariff thing. I was listening to the Spin Busters segment on CBC's Main Street yesterday afternoon. It was an excellent panel, all three of them. They come from different political stripes, but just sort of their insights and the level of discussion was way up there. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things they sort of universally kind of thought and had good arguments for is that we're just dealing with someone with a mob boss mentality. And the news broke about the sort of tariff thing while they were on air. So, I mean, it's sort of, the joke was, well, after a month later, it's going to be like, well, I'm going to need a little bit more money here from you. And they kind of did it in a cooler sort of accent I want. But they also sort of generally sort of agreed that this whole border security measures was basically a way just to throw Trump a bone and allow him to save face. That somebody basically got to him and was like, look, man, you're about to set off the sort of like biggest and most unnecessary trade war in the world. What are you doing? And he stepped back. But so I mean, like, and the other kind of what I really thought is that, it seems to Canada like we're having a bit of a moment, and maybe this is our moment to sort of look to ourselves and decide who we are and what we want, and just question, our reliance on the United States and the position it puts us in. So it's like whether or not we can, consume more of our own goods, open up interprovincial trade, look to diversify our economy and stuff like that. We're certainly going to give us that, incentive to do so. So, I mean, maybe this in the long run will turn out to be a good thing. And there was an analyst, I think it was either CBC or this station, sort of maybe about a week ago, and he did point out the tremendous clout we do have in the States with the terms of our energy and natural gas and electricity and all that stuff. But he also sort of made really compelling arguments. He seemed to know the system, the effect that this would have on Trump in, say, the midterm elections and ultimately for the next presidential election in terms of both houses and stuff like this. So, I mean, there are very serious consequences, if not for the United States, then for Trump alone. And if he wants this to be the issue that dominates the next 2 years of his presidency or the entire period, well, we can certainly give it to him. So, I mean, we didn't choose this fight, but we do have the ability to stand up to Trump. So, I mean, maybe it's up to us, for the sake of the rest of the world to sort of, help take him down a peg or two and maybe put a dent in this whole sort of, quote unquote, movement he started. So,
yeah. Okay. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
All right. Take care. 902-405-6000. Gloria, what are your thoughts on all of this?
I'll give you my opinion on President Trump.
Sure.
I think he is very insecure. You meet those people throughout your life, Todd, and when you're insecure, you lash out at other people. He's lashing out at Canada. He has us down on our knees. We're very vulnerable, and he's taking advantage of that. And he'll go throughout the whole world doing that. Whenever he sees a weakness, he will pounce on it. And shame on Canada. There was an entrepreneur on there the other day who said we could be the richest country in the world with everything we have here. But Todd, Canadians are lazy. They're lazy. It's much easier to buy something than produce it. And as I said, shame on us. And, we didn't do the right thing with the border. I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. And we say only so much fentanyl went through. Well, that's how much we caught. But, however, he will push us to the limit, and it will be one thing after the other because, as big and powerful as he thinks he is insecure, and he doesn't really like himself. That's the whole situation.
You really think Canadians are lazy? That's kind of a broad statement,
I think Canadians are lazy.
Really?
I do.
Wow.
I think Canadians, why wouldn't we be producing things? Why wouldn't we be doing things that we could be doing?
Well, because
much easier.
Because free trade has made it so that we can buy things a lot cheaper than
exactly a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
a lot cheaper. But you have to look at that and think, well, it's cheaper, but where are we going? We're not going very far, and we could be wealthy. We could have what we should have, but we don't. And the other thing, Todd, we have too many naysayers, and they get control. Nothing is good enough for a naysayer. There's always something wrong. You hear the comments now based on what the Premier said he's going to do. They're bouncing on it already. Alberta, they tried to shut down the oil works out there. And people will buy oil from there. They don't, the naysayers don't agree with what they're doing, but I have no problem with what they're doing. I mean, we have to look at the whole picture. You can't just pick out the parts that you like. You have to look at the whole thing. Anyway, and Todd, I am a Gemini.
There you go. Maybe the caller was onto something, right?
And I don't agree with what he said about the Gemini.
Okay.
I don't want Donald Trump to be a Gemini.
Okay, Gloria. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Lowell, hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi.
I have a book on our kitchen table. I have my watch on the book, and I'm going to time myself and take 45 seconds to say what I have to say, and then you can say what you wish. I timed the last three callers. One was 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Dave, 2.5 minutes. Gloria, 3 minutes, 15 seconds. I like Gloria, nice caller. Anyway, here's my little scoop, and I'll stop after 35 seconds. I have a book on the table. I told your buddy Dan Alstrand about it when you were off one day, and he didn't get any response from any callers, but I thought I'd mention it to you. It's written by a man called Bob Woodworth, and you probably know something about Bob Woodworth.
Yeah.
He's written 8 books dealing with 8 presidencies, from Nixon to Obama. This is his latest. On the first, basically 18 months of Donald Trump's first presidency. And it's called Fear, F-E-A-R, Trump in the White House, by Bob Woodworth. Now, this is a respected journalist, author. You probably remember something about Watergate. But anyway, so that's my thing, and I've listened to all this comment over the last weeks, I guess, about Trump, and we've had a lot of generality said about him, but I want to know if anyone has, other than Lowell Ritzy, that's my last name, Lunenburg County guy, has read this book, and if so, I'd like someone to maybe call in, maybe tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, next week, next month, next year, and to say, look, I've read that book, 353 pages. It is the only way to give a really honest, informed profile of this man. I'm finished.
Okay. Thank you for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. The challenge has been issued. Paula, hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm well, you?
Great, thank you. Just a few things. I do think what he just said, fear, is a big one. But I think Trump wants Canada because of all of our natural resources. And also because if you look at the population in the States versus Canada, right, we have a huge country, but we don't have the population, right? But I do think he wants Canada, right, for those reasons, for all our natural resources. And I also think that if Canadians were smart, we would do our own oil, because I do think that's the way to go. Build pipelines all across Canada that we can all get oil or natural gas, and also bringing back our oil refineries so we don't have to ship our oil to the States to get refined and buy it back at a premium. We could have our own oil, and not just in Alberta. We have it off the coast of Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. I just feel that we have a lot to offer, and I do think the government needs to cut taxes back big time so it won't be so expensive for, farmers or dairy products or lumber or, cut the taxes back. And I also feel the government should cut back, instead of giving us all these little checks here and there like GST, this and that. If he lowered the income tax, Canadians will have more money in their pocket. And, so we don't have to live in poverty anymore. These days, you have to make $100,000 just to survive. I mean, the cost of renting apartments is atrocious. If you had a mortgage 5 years ago, before all this happened, your mortgage was only $600, $700, $800 a month, depending on factors. But I mean, these people that are charging $2,000 and $3,000 a month for an apartment is, and the government should put a stop to that somehow. I don't know how, but they should look at ways, not just, letting them increase it here and there, but telling the landlords you can't charge that kind of money. Because in Nova Scotia, we don't make that kind of money to afford $2,000 and $3,000 a month rent. And some apartments that are going up now are like $5,000 a month.
Right. Okay. So what's your main point here? Because you get a little all over the map.
It's a little bit of everything. But
yes.
I think, in order to fight Trump, I think Canada has to, our government needs to get together and lower taxes to make it better, get rid of all the taxes going across each border in Nova Scotia and everywhere in Canada, and just giving people who are running businesses and things like that, give them tax cuts too, so it'll make it, cheaper for them than the consumer who buys the goods. It'll be cheaper for them to buy, and they won't need to buy from the States or elsewhere.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
You know?
Appreciate the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Greg, hello.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'll try to be as quick as I can. I have two small businesses. They're very modest, and I'm grateful for them, but one of them involves a lot of export to the U.S., and I was down in Dallas about 2 weeks ago, and I went to a restaurant near my hotel, Benihana. It's a Japanese restaurant. It's very social. They put me at a table with about 6 other people, some couples and some individuals, and of course you talk with everybody around you. So when it came up that I was Canadian, they really teased me about the 51st state thing, and a couple of them got into Trump. Most of them were clearly Trump supporters. And their perspective on Trump governing now is divine intervention, and Trump's really rolling with that too, like he did at the inauguration.
That's true, yeah.
And I'm not religious in the least, but my reply to them was, if you are religious and you believe in God and you believe in the devil, don't you think it's more probable that the devil intervened to save his life and not God? and of course you can imagine the reaction. They're like, that's just incredibly rude. You can't say that.
It's funny, is what it is. It's funny.
I'm not really joking though. If you believe that, because what has he ever done in his life that has been Christian or kind?
Well,
or
they
generous?
would say in response, Greg, and I think it's funny what you said, quite honestly, and there's some poetry to it. But what they would say is that Trump it comes down to the Christian right and the fundamentalist beliefs about abortion and some of these other key things, and that they believe that Trump will support that and does support that through the Supreme Court and through
And they're right.
And they're right. So therefore,
it has nothing to do with God.
No, I get it, but therefore they say God turns a blind eye to all of the other crap that Trump does and all of the other shenanigans that he does. So because he does his bidding when it comes to the higher order of things. That's the basic belief that they have.
How they justify.
Right.
That's how they justify voting for somebody who sexually assaults people and who is, very clearly a sociopath,
a convicted felon. I mean, it's but I think it's kind of funny actually what you said. And you know what? If people get offended by things like that, you need to get a little thicker skin. I mean, and all of a sudden, it's fun to have a little bit of levity from time to time, isn't it?
And just to open up their minds to the possibility that he's not everything that they imagine, because it does help them on some policy. And that's useful. But this could be a really good cultural reset for Canada. And even though the tariffs would have hurt me personally and will hurt all Canadians personally, I had mixed feelings about them continuing or not, because I thought the only way that they get a cultural reset in the U.S. is if the people who voted for them really start to hurt. But I don't want us to hurt, at the expense of that. I just want us to change, get rid of the interprovincial trade barriers, get those pipelines going east, start looking at other markets in the European Union who just loves us and wants to do more with us. Yeah. So hopefully all of that together will really get us going to realize, we were way too dependent on them.
Yeah. Okay. Good points, Greg. Thanks for the call.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. I did not get to all of you for that. I do apologize. Getting lots and lots of emails and response on this, and we'll continue to talk about it tomorrow for sure. The Science Files with Rob Thacker when we come back. All right, it is the Science Files. That means it's time to chat with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. And I looked down at my sheet, and it was something different. It wasn't my script. And I remembered who you were and your title, Rob. So I must still have something on the ball, at least for this week. Anyway.
Come on, Todd. If you can't remember who I am after all these years.
Well, you never know, right? You never know. Sometimes I forget my own name. So there you go.
Todd who?
That's right. Okay, so one of the goals will be to try, and I'm not going to succeed. I was going to try and get through an entire segment without talking about Donald Trump. But there is a connection to Donald Trump. And it's science related, and it's Elon Musk, and it's Starlink, and it's the Starlink system that the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, had a large contract with. Mm-hmm. And in light of what's going on with the trade war, it said that he would cancel the Starlink contract.
Interesting.
With
Okay.
Elon Musk. Now that's been reversed because Trump has given us a 30-day reprieve of sorts. So Starlink can be quite advantageous for those who don't have internet coverage.
Yeah.
Right?
So funnily enough, I actually had conversations with our premier about this, and so it does give you a remote option to basically put internet into anywhere, right? And so one of the issues with it is, though, you have to have good sight lines, right? So you need to have the reception system basically high up enough that if you're, say, in a forest or something like that. So some people do have cabins in a forest, obviously. So you do need to think about those kind of things, but it is, no question, a very effective way of providing internet pretty much to anywhere. The only downsides with it are that, other than the sort of like the access that you have and the price, it's not really cheap, is that if you have very heavy rain, then the radio won't penetrate that rain, right? So if you were using it, I don't know, for emergencies or something like that, it's probably not going to be reliable in that kind of situation. But otherwise, it is a pretty effective solution for getting internet out there, right? It really does work for that.
Okay, 902-405-6000. It's the Science Files. You know how it works. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. Science related, of course, 902-405-6000. So Starlink, can anybody purchase Starlink, or does it have to be in a certain geographical area? How does it work?
So I haven't checked what their coverage is like now. Initially, when it was rolled out, there were a few geographic restrictions, but that's some time ago now. There are several thousand more satellites up. So I'm not going to speculate because I'd have to sit down and look at a map, but I would suspect by now there's pretty much coverage pretty much everywhere now.
Yeah, and what about the cost? Is it relatively inexpensive, or?
Well, initially they had a few deals that made it fairly cheap, but I think it's something like, I don't know, it's like $100. So they start around $140 a month, if I remember correctly, and they go up from there, right? And so one of the issues is it can have a little bit of what we call latency delay because things have got to go up and then come back down, right? But it's not too bad. And if you're just moving a lot of data, if you're streaming, it's actually fine for that.
Okay. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files if you've got a science-related question.
Okay, actually, sorry, I just saw how much is Starlink Canada? It's $41.67 a month, so it's come down from what I saw, and you can do other payment alternatives as well.
Okay.
Like a yearly fee if you want to do that.
That's pretty affordable.
Yeah.
Not bad. 902-405-6000. Again, that's the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. 902-405-6000. Here's a quick email question before we go to the phones. Mark says, how do scientists determine Earth's location within the Milky Way when we are inside the galaxy itself?
So that's a good question. So really what we're doing is we're measuring our position relative to everything else, right? So we can do that without too much trouble because what you do is you literally measure the positions on the sky of all of the stars around you. And on top of that, if you have fine enough measurements, you can work out how they're moving as well. And then from that, you can literally build up a map of the neighborhood of all of the stars. It can be a little bit tricky to talk about the larger scale structures. Like we have spiral arms in our own galaxy that we know about, but the precise places of those is a little bit difficult to work out because you need to have information about how the stars are moving. And, you know, that the further away you get, the harder that becomes, right? So there's a few issues. If stars are very close, you can see them moving across the sky as well as moving forward and backwards. But the further away you get, the more you're restricted to just what we call the radial measurements. So that is how we do it. We really build up a map and then work it out from there. And so it's not, I would say, on large scales as accurate as we would like, because it's quite difficult to figure out how much mass there actually is in a given part of the Milky Way. Right. But you can do it locally to a fairly good degree of accuracy.
Okay. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. With Rob Thacker, give us a buzz. Again, 902-405-6000. Back to Elon Musk and SpaceX and its footprint and the U.S. and NASA's reliance on SpaceX.
Yeah.
How much... Is there a concern that Elon Musk and his connection with government and all of that and his influence, are any cause for concern here?
Yeah, there's already people saying that having someone who receives government contracts be a part of government is a fundamental problem. Right?
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would be controversial at all,
no,
right?
it is very, very peculiar.
Yeah.
And so I am looking at that. I'm wondering, look, I mean, you've also got someone who is a known friend of Elon Musk, essentially involved in running NASA now.
Yeah.
Right? And so there are all sorts of questions there. Funnily enough, if you want to be really cutthroat about it, you could say, well, what alternative is there?
Yeah.
And so the only other thing for the US space launches right now, other than United Launch Alliance, is really Blue Origin, and that's just getting going in terms of their New Glenn rocket. But who knows, maybe in a year or two, there will be significant competition there. But there's all sorts of questions. I agree.
Okay, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000. What's the latest when it comes to the lunar mission? Where are we with that?
So we're still hearing that the first flight around the moon that Jeremy Hansen will fly on, they're still saying that's 2026, right? But the reality is, going down to the surface in Artemis 3, there's still a lot of questions around that. I know that people still want to push for 2028, but what you got to remember is that A, they've got to be happy with the next version of Artemis for launch, and then B, this is what a lot of people don't know, is the landing vehicle is basically one of Elon Musk's crafts, right? So they've got to figure out A, the design for that in detail. I know they're working on it, but it's going to be difficult for them to test. That's a key thing. And then B, funnily enough, and this will amaze people, getting to the moon from an energy perspective for the particular design of rocket SpaceX has, it's not a lot different from going to Mars, right? So they have to get their vehicle up into orbit, and then they have to refuel it several times. And there are all sorts of questions about how many refuelings need to be done. And the last time I saw a press conference with NASA and SpaceX around this, NASA was pressing for an answer on how many refuelings it was going to be. And no one seemed to be able to give a straight answer on that.
Well, 902-405-6000. Alexander, hello. Hi, Alex.
I got a quick question for Dr. Thacker. Dr. Thacker, in April of 2019, the Israeli Space Agency launched a probe to the moon, which unfortunately was unsuccessful. It crashed on the surface. But on board was a cargo of water bears. And I'm sure you can describe for Todd's
tardigrades,
better than I can. But they're like the toughest little microscopic creatures we have on Earth, as far as I know. Any chance that we've contaminated the moon's surface? Could they still be alive? And for material that's brought back to Earth, how do we ensure that we're not bringing back something that could infect our environment? Do we irradiate it, or what?
Great questions. So to answer the second part first, because I actually think that's the most important part, there's a whole area of space law or space policy called planetary protection. And planetary protection is this idea that we don't want to introduce foreign stuff to pristine environments, and we don't want to take stuff from those environments that we don't know, we don't understand, and bring it back into our own environment. So there are all sorts of requirements for what you do with a space probe, depending upon what the final purpose of that space probe is. So, for example, carrying tardigrades and then having something crash onto a surface and release those, I actually think that's not 100% something that you can get through planetary protection without having very, very strong armoring of the canister and controlling how that's released. So there would be an issue there. For launching satellites, we will also, in many cases, disinfect them to high levels, but blasting them with radiation. Space does tend to kill things, right? That's something that we need to be aware of. So there are sort of like natural sterilizing things in space, all the cosmic radiation and things like that. But tardigrades themselves go dormant. They are incredible. They will survive in the vacuum of space for a period of time. I'm not sure if we really know just how long they can survive, but certainly beer bugs, which is a type of bacteria that lives in beer, that's known to have survived outside the space station for a number of weeks, right? So anything that's a bacterium, or tardigrades are bigger than a bacterium, that can go into this sort of like dormant state can actually potentially survive in a vacuum for some time. Right. So in terms of the Israeli probe that crashed, I'd be really curious to know. I can't say I've followed it, but it's something that would have to have been designed to fit in with planetary protection requirements.
Okay, so there's a chance that they could have gone dormant and still be living under a rock up there. Is that true?
I mean, if they're dormant, it's kind of questionable whether they're really alive. It's like they're like dormant like a spore or something like that. But But yeah, I mean, could they be revived? I don't know. That is honestly an interesting biology experiment that someone somewhere wants to do, I'm sure.
Thanks so much for your time.
No problem.
Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000.
Okay. Starlink
yes.
is actually $500 for the kit at Best Buy in Canada.
$500 for the kit?
Yep. So the financing was $40 a month.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I see. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. 902-405-6000. Science Files with Rob Thacker continues when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, 902-405-6000. That is the way to get in on the fun, 902-405-6000. Patrick, hello. Hey, Patrick, are you there? I looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at me as if to say everything should be good to go. Should be able to hear you. Patrick, one more try. Are you there? All right, we'll put Patrick on hold. Maybe Vanessa can figure it out. That's always the go-to,
Patrick
right?
Stewart off in Star Trek somewhere.
That's right. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. When it comes to the properties that Musk owns, and X being one of them, I still call it Twitter. Mm-hmm. Do you have concern from a scientist vantage point that data gets shared on social media, not just, in fairness, not just there, but Facebook, whatever, Instagram, whatever it might be, that's not vetted, or it's that people see it, and a lot of misinformation, disinformation gets spread around?
Well, what can I say? I'm a scientist, so I'm attached to facts, and so it's an enormous concern, right? And so what we're seeing more and more is what we call framing of information, right? And how you present information to people does make a difference. Like, I mean, as a scientist, I've heard it so many times. People say, well, the facts speak for themselves. And the honest answer is no, they don't, right? And so how you present information has an enormous impact. In fact, there is a wonderful series in the UK called Yes Minister, where they would play lots of word games and so on. It was quite funny, but they would literally take one thing and say it one way, and at the end of it, about like, are you concerned about the security of the country and so on? Do you think young people need something to do and so on? Do you think we should reinstate national service? And so the person would say yes after all of those things, right? And then if you flip it around and you say, is there too much focus on security? Are there too many people working in the services who could be doing trades? And then people say, oh, no, we shouldn't bring national service, or they don't have it anyway, but we should stay not having national service. And so all of those things, the way you present information impacts the way people respond to that information is a huge, huge issue, right? And I think what a lot of people may not really truly understand is that what's behind this now is it's not just propaganda as we know it. It's applied psychology, right? And so that is a problem for humanity. When you have a situation where people are literally being fed things in a way that we know is going to be advantageous to a particular viewpoint. And I don't care whether you're right or left, right? Because both sides do it to a certain extent, right? And so it's a problem. And we need to get back to sort of journalism as it was, right? With the journalists who were paid a decent salary to get the stories out there without embellishments on top of it.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Gary, hello.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Rob.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Rob, in the fall, I don't know if it's my imagination or not, but the sun seems brighter when it's setting. I don't know if it's got something to do with the tilt of the Earth or the air being clearer or not, or what.
I mean, it doesn't vary a huge amount in its brightness over the year. There's a very, very small distance change associated with the fact that the Earth isn't on a perfectly circular orbit. But honestly, I wouldn't say there's anything. I mean, I can try and think of, so there are some known what should we call it? Optical illusions. Like if you look up at the moon when it's very high up in the sky, it seems very small, whereas if you look at it when it's near the horizon, it seems very big. And that's purely an optical illusion created by when you tilt your head and look up and there's no reference for the moon, it looks like it's small. When, on the other hand, you aren't tilting your head, you're looking towards the horizon, there are all these reference points, it looks bigger, right? You can actually take a mirror and compare the two. Right, to show they're the same size, right? So there are things like that, and I would say that if there is a I mean, the sun is obviously closer to the horizon in the winter than it is in the summer, so there could be a factor there. That's probably about the best kind of explanation I can come up with.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us again. 902-405-6000. The arc of the sun, the height that the sun gets, is considerably lower this time of year, though, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's one of the big reasons why we get cold in the winter is literally because the sun is lower, so what's called the cosine factor of the sun's strength is smaller as well, right? So it's coming in at a certain angle. But when you stand up, you kind of make up for that because it's dependent upon the angle that the surface of the Earth has. And that's actually one of the reasons why we tilt solar panels as well, because we're trying to get the maximum solar illumination by changing the angle of the solar panels.
Right on. Okay, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. We got Rob Thacker for another half hour. Got some room for you as well. Get some open lines. Give us a buzz if you'd like to chat with Rob. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, it is the Science Files, and we've got Rob Thacker of St. Mary's University to the top of the hour. Get some room for you as well. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Let's try Patrick again. Hello, Patrick.
Hi, here's probably get on. Well, hello, Todd, and hello, Doctor.
Hi there.
Well, when I talk about carriers here in Nova Scotia for internet, they all have a blackout problem.
Okay.
Like a lot of times like if you're watching the hockey or you're watching something, it'll black out and it may come on a second later. But other times it may not come on until about 4 or 5 seconds later.
Okay.
That's because of the rain fog.
Yeah, so I mean, so we actually mentioned that if you have a high enough what we call water column density, so there's a lot of rain, then the radio waves can't actually get through that.
Yeah, so Elon Musk is not the only one with the problem there.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
And about the Mars thing, would the person's body deteriorate before he even got to the planet?
So, sorry, in what context are you talking about?
I'm talking about their eyeballs get smaller and... so
if you were out basically on the Martian surface and you didn't have a spacesuit, what would happen? Is that your concern?
No. When they're in the space craft, they have to exercise to try to keep their body mass up.
Yes.
Do they not?
Yep, they do.
But that's a long flight, and I'm not sure.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, understood. Yeah. Understood, Patrick. So in terms of concerns about the overall atrophy that will happen, so we've been able to do a lot in terms of weighting people to help preserve muscle structure. The challenge is still bone density and bone structure, but for a 6 to 8 month trip, it's not going to be great, but by the time you get to Mars, you should still be able to function. Remember, Mars has lower gravity than the Earth does. So it's not like you're going to be going back to full Earth gravity. I do get what you're talking about. And yes, there will definitely be some issues for people having to adjust to the gravity on Mars as they go from basically zero gravity for several months to back into...
Will that person be able to make it back alive?
As long as we can get the return journey planned for them, I think the answer to that is in theory yes. Yeah, really. I mean, as long as something untoward doesn't happen, there's no necessarily belief that they would be so incapacitated by the low gravity environment for a long period of time that they wouldn't be able to come back. I mean, we've had astronauts up for over a year on the space station, right? And so they've been able to come back. I mean, not in great shape, let's be clear. But if you go for 6 months to Mars and then you spend time in the low gravity, but it is a gravitational environment on Mars, so you will have some help there, and then come back again, in all probability, yeah, you should be able to come back. You won't be great shape when you get back because you'll have been 6 months again in zero gravity, but you should be able to get back. Yep.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
Hey, guys. I just have two really quick questions.
Sure.
My first one is, if the sun is 1 light year away, if you're traveling at the speed of light, does that mean that it would take you a year to get there?
Aha, okay. So it depends upon whose frame of reference you're measuring that, right? And so moving clocks run slower, right? So if you're watching from outside and you're stationary and you watch someone travel, then yes, you would perceive them as taking a year to get there. But on the other hand, if you were actually traveling towards the sun yourself, then you get something that was called time dilation, right? So it would be different. And in fact, this is really crazy when you look at what happens when you send someone to a distant star and then bring them back again, right? Because when you do that, literally, the person who was sitting here waiting will be older than the person who went off at very high speed and then came back again. Right? It's called the twin paradox.
That would lead right into my second question. With, you probably maybe seen the movie Interstellar?
Yep.
So when they go into the deep sleep to travel like that, is that just a theory or movie magic, or is that?
Well, that's unfortunately Yeah, it would be really lovely if we could do that kind of hibernation, but at the moment we simply don't know how to do it. We do believe that mammals, because we know bears can hibernate, right? So low activity states are possible, but we don't really know how to put humans in those and make them recover. We don't really have that technology at all. It would be amazing if we could. I mean, we've hypothesized it for a long time, but as yet, no, we don't know how to do that.
Okay, great. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Bill, hello.
Hi, gentlemen. Nice
hey.
to talk to you. Dr. Thacker.
Sure.
I read that Russia invaded Ukraine, and when they did that, they shut down all the communications that they had in there. And what happened after that is Ukraine reached out to Musk.
Yep.
And hence Starlink was put up.
Yep.
And the next step was that Ukraine had torpedoes of some kind heading towards Crimea for the warships of Ukraine. And Elon Musk shut it down with a push of a button, I guess. He said that I gave you Starlink for defensive purposes and not for attacking purposes. Thinking of that, my question is this. If Elon Musk had 3 million vehicles, Tesla vehicles in Canada, is it possible for him to push a button and shut them all down?
I mean, the incredible thing about this is a kind of nightmare scenario that we don't want to think about, but we probably should be thinking about. And so remote contravening of vehicles is really something that's significant, right? So we have concerns about the Internet of Things, And so that's this idea that you can have all of the appliances in your house connected onto the internet, and then you see there are even movies about this, people taking over people's houses and so on. And so people do really worry about this kind of security. What you're talking about is essentially, would a manufacturer ever build a back door that gave them total control? And the answer to that is you don't ever really know, unless you can break down all of that technology and go through each piece of code line by line by line to know what backdoors exist. Now, would it be in their interest to do that? I don't know. I don't think so, right? I mean, it's having that much power, unfortunately, would have its consequences in a democracy, hopefully. And so all of that said, again, interception of control of electronic systems, Internet of Things and so on, is a real cybersecurity issue. There's no question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doc.
Okay.
I appreciate your answer.
Yeah.
Thanks for the call, 902-405-6000. Bobby, hello.
Good day, gentlemen. My question is, why does sound waves move faster through water than in air?
So it's literally, the best way to think about it is the forces that you have between the atoms in the air versus the atoms in water are stronger in water, right? And so if you go and take this even further to something that's even sort of like harder than, so take a metal, right? Sound speed in metals, where you have this lattice of atoms that are really can't move very much at all. What we call the restoring force to the pressure wave is much stronger even in a metal than it is in water. So the sound speed in metals is even higher than it is in water. So that's really the best way to think about it. What are the forces that, as the atoms actually move around and compress under the pressure waves, how quickly are those going to respond? And it's the strength that determines the speed at which they respond.
Interesting. So like because you could hear better in the fog, like you could hear your neighbors yelling across the road in the fog way better than when it's dry out. So how does the sound wave, does it go faster through the air droplet?
So I'll tell you, I'm not entirely sure about that situation. My suspicion there is that may well, and I could be wrong, right? So I just bear with me on this. So when that specific situation you're talking about, I know exactly what you're talking about, but everything is extremely still when you get that kind of, it's like everything is muffled, right? Everything is very still. You can hear everything around you. So I'm honestly not sure whether that is as much a factor. Like nothing is moving, everything is still. You've not got any high winds blowing or anything like that. I'm not sure whether that is as much of an issue as having the increased moisture in the air. I don't know. Maybe someone who's an acoustics expert might know.
Gotcha. Yeah, because it doesn't really make sense to me that the waves, your sound waves, are hitting the water and makes somehow it goes farther. It doesn't really add up. But
yeah, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and it is kind of amazing sometimes when you come out in the morning. Everything is incredibly still, and it feels almost like the sound is being kept around you. It's a very unusual feeling. I don't quite know how to describe it eloquently.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks a lot. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University. 902-405-6000. We got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour and have some room for you as well. Give us a buzz. 902-405-6000. We'll be back. All right, the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University. We've got Rob to the top of the hour. Got some open lines for you as well. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, give us a call, 902-405-6000, just like that. Hello, Todd.
Hi, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hey.
A question for Dr. Rob. I was reading recently on Apple News, I believe it was, the rover that's up there sending back pictures. It showed what appeared to be ripples in sand of what I believe I read was what possibly was a shallow lake bed. So my question is, if in fact that what it was, however many billion years ago that that Mars had an atmosphere, where would that water have gone to when I believe I read it, there was oceans and large lakes or whatever. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, you're asking a question that I have wondered about as well. So I've heard a couple of explanations, right? And the first is that you do get some natural evaporation, right? And so you lose things over time. That's, in fact, one of the problems with the Martian atmosphere in general, is that because the planet is that much smaller than the Earth, it's harder for it to hold on to molecules in the atmosphere. And so then on top of that, when you don't have a magnetic field to help sort of like funnel all of the cosmic rays from the sun to the poles and protect the planet a little bit, then you can literally have the atmosphere get blown off a lot quicker. So you can have that increased evaporative loss. But the other thing that I've heard is a lot of those or a lot of the water may actually be wrapped up in hydrated minerals. So it's been basically chemically introduced into minerals on the planet. Quite how much is in that, I have honestly no idea. You'd have to talk to a geologist. I'm sure there are estimates of how much is in that. And then lastly, there is sort of like suggestions of, if not true, what we would call subsurface lakes or ice, then areas where there is nonetheless a lot more buried water, right? And so we have radar studies that have suggested a number of these particular places. I think there was one that we looked at a few months ago that was like 5 kilometers by a kilometer or something like that. So the essence is there's a couple of things that, I mean, the water can literally just go away, evaporate away, and then on top of that, it can go into minerals as well.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. We've got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour. Got some room for you as well if you'd like to get a question in or two. 902-405-6000. One of the stories that you sent along, Dr. Rob, I wanted to ask you about, are dogs really bred for function? A new study challenges the assumptions about certain breeds. And I thought that was pretty interesting stuff. A lot of dog lovers out there. So what are some of the ins and outs of this story?
So this is there's a few things that we can talk about in this story that I got questions, right? Okay. But nonetheless, what they've done is they've taken dog skulls and they've made lots of measurements on them for different breeds of dogs. I think it was nearly 120 different breeds of dogs, including some wolves in there too as well. So they looked at the overall structure. We know that there's sayings, that dog was built for its biting, right? Or that dog was built for its sniffing, right? And so let's start with the sniffing. The idea there is that maybe the design of the nose, right, could help a dog to sniff better, right? And so they looked at this and they basically found there didn't seem to be a lot of evidence across the different breeds for any real differences in the nasal cavities themselves. Now, this is distinct, of course, from all of the olfactory sensors that are in the nose themselves. You don't get that when you just look at a skull, right? So they said, but nonetheless, on the basis of the shape, the only thing that was notably different, I think, was a bulldog that had a very shortened and sort of like pug nose, and that was something that may well have been bred for human interest, let's put it that way, and so on. So then the other thing was biting, right? And so obviously you might look at jaws and say, are there different kinds of jaw designs associated with dogs that are known for biting? I mean, pit bulls, for example, right? And as it turns out, they didn't really find much in the design of the skull that was very different from breed to breed, right? And so again, I think the caveat to that is when you talk about bite strength, you've got to factor in not only the jaw design, but also the muscle strength behind that bite, right? And that's something that you have to think about as well. And I didn't see any discussion of that, so I'm curious as to how that played out. But in terms of just, let's call it the morphology, to give it a fancy word, of the skulls, there doesn't actually seem to be as much difference as you might have expected.
Okay, because we know that like terriers are often thought to be designed to be able to go into small areas and to get rats and rodents and that type of thing, right?
So terriers have a lot in common with foxes. They did sort of look at this. And so foxes are designed for chasing small rodents, capturing small rodents. And so terriers by and large are trained or bred for the same thing. And so funnily enough, they also probably have a root in foxes too, if you go back far enough in terms of the breeding. And there's a lot of commonalities there. So that's one area. It's not to say there aren't sort of like interesting specializations that happen in skull design. It's just that the things that we have thought that they might be for, right, like bite strength and breathing, those don't seem to be particularly strongly bred for in terms of the skull.
Okay, so kind of the human touch involved in it is exaggerated then, perhaps.
The suggestion is that humans may have done part of this breeding just because they liked the way it looked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's obviously something that's going to happen. I genuinely wonder about that. I mean, were people thousands of years ago thinking about the way their dogs looked as much as they do now?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about that. Maybe that's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just calling into question this idea that dogs have been bred for a specific purpose. And if we were to do things like measure the skull morphology and so on, we'd find these really significantly different things. And we don't. That's the incredible things.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider is the time horizon as to how long these things take in order for things to be impactful in nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, so how many generations does it really take to make a change,
Sure,
right?
yeah,
And so dogs, I mean, you can get a generation of dogs in like 4 or 5 years. So you could imagine 20 generations of dogs, right?
Yeah.
That's something that you could do in a human lifetime, just about. So yeah.
A dog off a leash in an area where it's not supposed to be on a leash, that's something that is a pain in the butt.
I don't know what to say. I mean, I've had not too many difficult situations with dogs. I mean, I don't dislike dogs. I'm not a huge dog lover either.
Yeah.
But I mean, my sister had the most amazing Doberman, for example, right? This is one of the things with sort of like traditionally seen as aggressive dogs, right?
Mhm.
People get scared of them for obvious reasons. Whereas with this particular dog, it was the soppiest dog you could ever meet. And it was this Doberman. It looked terrifying, but it was so soppy, right? It was scared of everything, right? And people couldn't believe it. The only time that was funny in terms of like perceptions of it would be as soon as it was sort of like didn't know what something was or someone was coming around, it would bark. And of course, when it barked, that could be pretty scary, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, that was that was soppier than my sister's Labrador.
Yeah.
Right? It was kind of incredible. It really changed my thinking about the nature of dogs.
I guess what I'm getting at is just my opportunity to vent a little because I walk a dog regularly. We have a dog.
Yeah.
And it's a leashed area, and oftentimes, too often, a person will walk their dog and innocently enough off the leash, and their dog is friendly, and they say, "Oh, he's friendly." But that is first of all, you're putting both dogs in a potentially dangerous situation, right?
Yep.
And I just think that it's a pet peeve of mine. Leash your dog if you're going to be in a leashed area.
Well, if it's a leashed area, that's the law. I mean, by law, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's right. Well, Rob Thacker, did we miss anything? Anything that you were dying to get out to the masses that we didn't achieve, or what? Because
nothing that I'm dying to get out. So no, that was fine. I mean, there's two stuck astronauts. They're still up there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, that's right. What's the update on that?
Oh gosh, I mean, 8 months has become 10 months now. So March, April for coming back down. Although the funniest thing in all of this is how Elon Musk is saying, well, it's taken SpaceX to the rescue to bring him back down.
Right,
so that's a bit of a that's an Elon Musk move. Yeah. So anyway, but they did a spacewalk, that just the two of them outside looking for. I think they were looking at residue on the outside of the space station. And why were they doing that? Because literally looking for any microbes that have come up from the Earth on a launch and might still be on the outside of the space station.
Maybe they just wanted to get away from each other.
Well, why did they go out together to do the spacewalk? Anyway, yeah.
That's right. Rob, always great. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for the great questions.
All right, that's Rob Thacker. That's Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.